Good morning. Welcome to episode 83 of Duval Rundown. My name is Gus Logue. Today I'm joined, as I am each Tuesday, by Hays Carlyon of The Frangie Show, which you can catch on 1010XL 92.5 FM radio in Jacksonville each weekday from 4 to 6 p.m. on the afternoon drive home. Hays and I are here to recap the Jaguars' first day of free agency. Technically, free agency opens on Wednesday, but the tampering/negotiation period opened at noon Monday. The Jaguars signed a whopping 9 free agents. Cornerback Jordan Lewis, quarterback Nick Mullins, tight end Johnny Munt, tight end Hunter Long, wide receiver Diami Brown, safety Eric Murray, offensive lineman Patrick McCarry, offensive lineman Chuma Edoga, and center Robert Hainsey. So, Hays, welcome back to the show.
Thank you.
What was just like your kind of general takeaway from all of the flurry of moves that Jacksonville made yesterday?
I thought it was
so many moves in the first place. I mean, 9 free agents is a lot for one day.
Yeah, without a doubt. I thought that it's not going to have a lot of sizzle, obviously, but that wasn't their intention. It's been talked about a lot over the last 24 hours, but you go back to the comments that James Gladstone made at the Combine, and he said, we're going to elevate the floor of this roster immediately. That's what they've done, at least in their eyes, in free agency. So it's 9 guys, none of which are massive financial commitments, but they fill roles, and that's what this team needed. This team has its core. They'll add to it with the 5th pick and the high 2nd rounder, and hopefully one of those 2 3rd rounders becomes that kind of player. But their core is Trevor Lawrence, Trayvon Walker, Josh Hines-Allen, Tyson Campbell, Brian Thomas Jr. Maybe you can make an argument for the offensive tackles. I don't really think they've done enough to be included, but they do have, at least they know who their starters are at 2 premier positions. So, in looking at it, they needed to get better in the supplemental lower level of the roster. And, they've done that. They signed 2 tight ends, neither of which is the son of the head coach. So that's an upgrade. I'm excited to see where it goes from here.
Yeah, I think you nailed it on the head, especially with like the raising of the floor comment that you echoed from Gladstone, because I think generally speaking, like if a team is very active on the first day of free agency, it's typically not a good sign, because they're typically overpaying, as we've seen Jacksonville do in the past, like overpaying to get talent into the building. And I don't know how many of these contracts are really overpays. I know that Jordan Lewis and Eric Murray, the 2 secondary players that were signed to 3-year deals, but those might be the only 3-year deals. I could be mistaken, but it's not a lot of like long-term contracts. It's certainly not a lot of money. It's not like there's any like Shaq Griffin or Christian Kirk type contracts being handed out. So like what we've seen the Jaguars do in the past is try to bring in talent and overpay for talent to raise the ceiling of their team and to try to like bring in stars and starting caliber guys. And so even though it is on one hand like a little bit scary that they signed 9 guys on the first day, the way that they went about it is good, because rather than trying to address the top of their depth chart, it was really kind of filling out the middle and the back end of their depth chart. And so, as Floyd said on YouTube, this is what a draft and develop team should use free agency for. And so, of the 9 names that I read out, Hays, is there anyone that excites you the most that the Jaguars did agree to terms with yesterday?
Yeah, I mean, to me, I think it'd have to be Patrick McCarry, just because of the nature of the offensive line, and what a subpar unit it's been now for a number of years. So again, not that McCarry is a star, not trying to sell him as that, but he's a versatile player. I would imagine that he's Sheriff's replacement at right guard, even though that's the spot on the line he's played the least. But I would think that he's the right guard. That, to me, it was about the offensive line. To get 3 offensive linemen, again, when you start to break down what's the final 53 going to look like, they're probably keeping 10 offensive linemen. They could keep 9, they could keep 11, but let's just say they keep 10. That's the safest bet. Well, they just signed 3 guys that are all going to make the team. Little, obviously, Harrison, Cleveland, they're making the team.
Mm-hmm.
So that's 6 guys right there. Then you've got your Fortners and Van Lannens and Hodges, and obviously I think they're going to draft an interior offensive lineman no later than the third round. That player is obviously a lock to make the team. So if you have 3 free agents, a draft pick, and your 2 tackles and your left guard for now, we'll see if Cleveland gets beat out. But you've really remade that room, and now you've got a much better idea of who your offensive linemen are going to be, on that 53. So, it was Macari was sort of the headliner of the group. Hainsey got beat out last year in Tampa by a first-round rookie in Barton. So, but he at least is familiar with Liam Cohen. So it'll be interesting to see what kind of improvement he makes at center with the Mitch Morse retirement. And then you get a quality, I would imagine swing tackle is what Idogba will eventually be. But I do think they're going to give him the opportunity to win one of the tackle jobs. I mean, again, their starting left tackle, who the previous administration gave an extension to, has never won a job in training camp. And I think they're very cognizant of that. So I think they wanted to sign somebody that had starting experience at tackle in this league that could push the 2 incumbents. I don't think he'll unseat them, but I think it was important to add a player that gives a credible ability to push for a starting job.
Yeah, and that's what it's really all about, like the cliche of using free agency for needs and then the draft for wants. It's really more about like not pigeonholing yourself in the draft, and so like being able to fill your roster holes so that you don't feel like you have to go in a certain direction, especially in the first round. So yeah, definitely good that they got a starting caliber right guard, a starting caliber center. I know that Hainsey from Tampa Bay was not very good 2 years ago when he replaced longtime Bucs center Ryan Jensen, and obviously the Bucs went ahead and drafted Graham Barton, I believe, in the first round last year to replace him. But Hainsey did appear a little bit last year and seemed to be much improved in Liam Cohen's scheme. As you said, he's obviously got that familiarity, and really like this age of like centers is not very good. Like especially after Jason Kelce retired, like Creed Humphrey is probably the best center in the NFL, and he's a great player. But like I don't know, there's not a lot of very good centers out there, and so we talked about that last week. How like there's Drew Dahlman and Ryan Kelly were kind of really the only notable centers that are out there in free agency. So I think that this connection obviously makes a lot of sense. I would think that Hainsey will probably replace at least Luke Fortner as like the starting center right now. And then the move that I really liked from the Jaguars is that they signed Diami Brown from Washington to a 1-year contract. He was a little bit kind of up and down throughout the regular season in Washington last year, and he was drafted by Washington originally 4 years ago. And up and down career, really, and even up and down regular season last year, but he kind of was a playoff hero and a playoff X factor for the Commanders in their 3 playoff games this season. And so I think that on one hand, you don't really want to bank on a player's production in like just the last 3 or 4 games that you've seen from him. But at the same time, it's only a 1-year contract for Diami, and so I think it's a really good investment that could, and I expect to pay off. But even if like it turns out to be a total bust, it's only a 1-year deal, and so I like that move a lot because Brown is like a vertical threat who will be able to help create space for Brian Thomas. He's really good at yards after the catch, especially for his size and his speed, because he's kind of size-wise a prototypical, just like ex-boundary receiver. But I think he actually offers a good amount of versatility, and he's can hypothetically be a starter for the Jaguars, but that signing wouldn't prevent them from drafting a receiver early. So I'm really looking forward to Diami Brown playing in teal. Is there anything that, like any free agents that you're a little bit unsure of, or even any position groups that you're a little bit unsure of? Like the defensive line, for instance, has not been addressed yet.
Yeah, defensive line hasn't been addressed, but obviously we feel like there's a good chance that that's Mason Graham at 5. So that would obviously be the big addition for that room if that's in fact how the draft plays out. And we'll see. I don't think they're done. I mean, I don't think it's going to be 9 more guys. I mean, the math is starting to work against you, but I could see it being another 1 or 2. I did a quick 53. I've got 47 guys right now, incorporating the 9 from yesterday. I've got a 47-man team. And in terms of what I mean by that is I've got 47 guys that they've either committed money to or drafted, or they've played enough to where it would make some sense that they would probably be on the right side of the bubble when you cut this thing. So if you've got 47, you got 10 draft picks, obviously, it's a 53-man roster. You're going to have undrafted free agents as well. But the kind of what I see is I could see another name or two here, particularly as you start to get, once you get that ridiculous tidal wave of free agency out of the way and the dust kind of settles, there's going to be players that are still on the board that they're probably going to circle back to and be like, okay, we didn't really think that, we'd be a contender because of where we figured the money would be, but the money wasn't there. And this player is still on the board. So, maybe you make a second or, maybe give it a little bit closer of a look because maybe you misread what the market would be. And every team does that. That's not, it's impossible to predict what these guys are going to get. Who could have predicted Luke Farrell would get $20 million in a contract? So, so you could still see, I think, a guy or two come in on free agency. It'll be like these deals. It's not going to be a big deal, but something like this, and so in looking at it, I don't think that necessarily, that we've seen the last free agent of consequence be brought in, but yeah, I think they're in a good shape. Looking at it, I do think receiver will be something that they have to look at in the draft, and interior offensive line. So if you're looking at Mason Graham at 5, let's say receiver, high second round pick, which would be a nice prospect. Maybe the Harris kid out of Ole Miss would fit that, but there's a number of receivers that could be in play there. And then in the 2 third-round picks, maybe that's where you go left guard to somebody that can really push Ezra Cleveland out of that spot. So I think that they've positioned themselves to be in a good position. No one's going to look at their class nationally and do cartwheels over it. But I think for where the Jaguars are, I think they made a lot of smart moves yesterday. And like you said, none of these moves tie them down like last year's dreadful free agent class has, where you've got a receiver in Gabe Davis that you'd love to cut, but you can't because it costs you more to cut him than to just keep him. And he has no trade value. So none of these deals are going to be like that. I think, Brown 1-year deal, sure. He's an up and coming player. If it doesn't work out, you move on. So no, I like how they have structured this. They have a lot of dead cap. That's going to come off the books, obviously, this time next year. I think it's 50. They've got almost $59 million in dead cap money. That all is going to come off the board. So when you're looking at a franchise that's getting ready to take on that Trevor Lawrence big number, well, they're positioning themselves in a way in which they'll be able to absorb that and still be aggressive in how they want to go about building the team around Trevor.
Yeah, I definitely agree with your point about how they haven't added to the defensive line yet, but they probably will. Someone said in the comments, Brian on YouTube, so we're just giving up on Mason Smith. Even if you think that Mason Smith is a surefire future all-pro player, that doesn't mean you shouldn't add to the room. There's a lot of bodies in that room, but just because it's kind of like the offensive line, just because Ezra is there doesn't mean you can't improve or add depth to that position, and especially at defensive line where offensive line, it's you have your starters and they're your starters typically unless they get injured, but defensive line is obviously much more of a rotation, and defensive line, especially edge classes, edge free agency classes in previous years, there's always a guy like Jadeveon Clowney or in previous years, a Melvin Ingram, just a veteran guy that's going to wait around until even training camp to sign a deal with the new team. But even defensive tackle too, especially this year, where we saw Grady Jarrett get released by the Falcons yesterday. Calais Campbell is still around. I think there's a lot of really solid veteran defensive tackles in this year especially. And so would expect them to sign some form of defensive lineman, but it'll be interesting to see when that happens, because I honestly wouldn't be shocked if it does happen after the draft. So defensive line definitely like the position to kind of keep your eye on going forward, I think.
Yeah, the other thing I would say about Mason Smith, and I like Mason Smith's potential as well, but you can't just put him on a pedestal. I mean, this is a guy who admitted he struggled with his conditioning. I mean, this is as a rookie, his playing time, he was inactive at times because of his conditioning, not because of an injury, because, he wasn't hitting the barometers of what they expected from a conditioning standpoint. Well, if, even if he's come through that and you feel confident that that's behind him, you still can't just say, we've seen enough, he's all we need there. I mean, obviously, yeah, it's a position where you're going to rotate anyway. But Mason Smith has shown promise, but you can't just assume he's going to turn into this star, particularly when he had conditioning issues as a rookie, which should never happen by his own admission.
Yeah, he said multiple times last year he kind of had to like learn how to be a pro, even before the season started, but obviously throughout the season too. So look out for that position. The once free agent signing that the Jaguars made yesterday that I'm a little bit iffy on would be cornerback Jordan Lewis from the Cowboys. I think that he's arguably the most talented person or player that they brought in yesterday, and arguably has the most kind of like on the field and off the field intangibles that Gladstone and all of them are looking for. Certainly a great leader by all accounts from Dallas media and Dallas fans. But he is on the wrong side of 30. He's 5'10", sub 200 pounds. Typically, you see a pretty dramatic drop-off, kind of like a dramatic age cliff for the cornerback position, especially small slot corners. And so I'm a little bit iffy giving him a 30-year-old a 3-year contract to be a nickel corner. And really, like the main question I think is just like, what does this mean for Jarrian Jones? Because I think that the majority of people in Jacksonville assumed that last year's FSU rookie Jarrian would be just the starting nickel corner going forward. And so do you think that by signing Jordan Lewis, who's just objectively going to be the starting nickel now because of the contract that he just got, what do you think that means for Jarrian Jones? Do you think that means the coaching staff sees him potentially as an outside corner, or maybe the new coaching staff doesn't see him as a starting corner at all?
I hope it's that they see him as the opposite of Tyson Campbell on the other perimeter. I really like Jarrian Jones. I like his attitude, and I think he's a really skilled player, and I think he's a mentally mature player. And I think he'd have been fine at nickel, but I do like the idea. My hope, because we don't know, my hope is that they're not giving up on him. I mean, that would surprise me, because I thought he played well from what we saw. Again, given everything that we now know about what a just mess it was on that side of the ball with Ryan Nielsen as coordinator. So, I'd hate to judge anybody too harshly off of their rookie year playing in a scheme that obviously wasn't even remotely close to what a functioning NFL defense should look like. I hope it's to give him a real shot on the perimeter. I think he can do it, but we'll have to see. And I would imagine it's for him to have a bigger bringing Lewis in is so Jarrian can be moved to a more full-time role. But that'll be one of the fascinating aspects of OTAs when we're able to get out there and watch is to see exactly how they're going about that.
Absolutely. Yeah, that'll definitely be something to watch. The takeaway that I have, kind of regardless of whether where Jarrian Jones kind of ends up on the depth chart on the roster or whatever, I think it's a sign that new defensive coordinator Anthony Campanile wants to run a lot of man coverage. So I think that's Jordan Lewis's biggest strength. He definitely has the aggressiveness and the play style to be able to play against the run, but especially because of his size, he's not really a modern slot receiver like a Cooper DeJean in Philadelphia, where he's not almost a linebacker, but he's really almost as valuable as a run defender as he is a pass defender. I think Jordan Lewis is a valuable run defender, but really more so much more valuable pass defender, and can play a lot of slot coverage, whether it's man or zone. But I think that Jarian was a little bit better at like run support and a little bit better at zone coverage, and maybe didn't really have the athleticism to be able to hold up for 80-90% of snaps in man coverage. Obviously, we saw that Ryan Nielsen didn't run that much man coverage in general last year, but I think that Campanile will want to run more man coverage, and that was a big reason for the signing. But that's kind of everything that I've got. Hays, do you have any other like lingering thoughts before we get out of here?
No, I think solid start for the Jags, and the real fireworks will come when we get to the NFL draft.
Absolutely. All righty. Thank you, Hays, as always, for joining.
Thank you, Gus. I hope you feel better.
I appreciate it. Yeah, we're going a little short today because I'm feeling just got a little itch in my throat, but hopefully I'll be back good tomorrow. Got a really exciting guest for tomorrow. I won't reveal it right now just because haven't had a lot of luck or great success in terms of guests showing up on time. But hopefully this one will show up on time. The national guest for tomorrow, 9:04 a.m. Eastern on Wednesday. See you guys then. Hays, I'll see you around. Thanks again for joining.
All right. Bye, Gus.
Peace, guys.